Let me ask you something before I start. Why did you click on this story? Think about that while I talk. I want you to picture Atlanta the way it looks when you first arrive, with nothing but hunger and a dream that feels bigger than your bank account. The skyline hits different when you're broke. It doesn't look like opportunity. It looks like a dare. Like the city itself is staring you down, asking, what exactly do you think you're doing here? That's how I felt the night everything started. Young, hungry, convinced that I was different, convinced that Atlanta was going to see that. I still work at Tyler Perry Studios. I want you to sit with that sentence for a second before we go any further. I still work there. I know those hallways. I know those sets. I know the way the light hits the main building in the morning and makes the whole place look like something holy. I know what happens when the cameras stop rolling. I know what lives inside those walls after dark. And I'm telling you this story right now from the inside. Remember that. It started at dinner. Me and two of my boys. Nothing special. Just three young men in Atlanta trying to feel like we belonged somewhere. The restaurant was nice. Nicer than we were used to. White tablecloths, low lighting. The kind of place where everybody looks like they're one conversation away from changing their life. We were loud. We were happy. We were completely unaware that someone across that room had already noticed us, had already noticed me. The waiter came to our table with 2 bottles of champagne. I remember the way the condensation ran down the glass. Cold, perfect. The kind of bottles that cost more than my rent at the time. My boy looked at me. I looked at him. Neither one of us ordered anything like that. I flagged the waiter down and asked what was going on. She smiled the way people smile when they already know something you don't and pointed across the room. I looked up, and he was already smiling. Tyler Perry. Sitting across that restaurant like a king surveying something he had already decided belonged to him, dressed impeccably, calm. That smile never wavered. Not for a second. It was the kind of smile that had been practiced so long it stopped being an expression and became a mask. I didn't know that then. My boy grabbed a bottle immediately. And I want to be honest with you right now because this is the part of the story where I need you to understand something about ambition, about what it does to your instincts, about how it turns down the volume on the part of your brain that is screaming that something is wrong. I felt it that night. That low, quiet wrongness, sitting underneath the excitement like a current under still water. But I reached for the glass anyway. The champagne was cold going down, expensive, the kind of taste that makes you feel like you've already arrived somewhere. And the moment I took that first sip, I looked up without thinking, and he was still watching me. Not the table, not my boys, me. That smile hadn't moved an inch, like he had been waiting specifically for that moment. Like watching me drink was the whole point. I set the glass down slower than I picked it up. 20 minutes later, the hostess appeared at our table. Young woman, professional. She leaned down and placed a small folded piece of paper next to my hand, like she was delivering a check. She didn't say a word, just smiled and walked away. I unfolded it. A phone number, 10 digits, and underneath it in clean, deliberate handwriting, call me. No name, no explanation, none needed. I looked across the room. His table was empty. Tyler Perry was already gone. Like he had never been there at all. Like the whole thing had been a transaction he completed and walked away from before I even understood what had been purchased. That was the first door. And I want you to understand something about doors like that. They don't look like doors when you're standing in front of them. They look like opportunities. They look like finally. They look like everything you came to Atlanta for is sitting right across the room, just waiting for you to be brave enough to reach for it. I folded that number and put it in my pocket. And the whole ride home, I told myself, I probably wouldn't call. You already know that's a lie. And somewhere deep down, so do you. I called the number 3 days later. I told myself I waited because I was being smart, calculated, that I wasn't going to seem desperate. The truth is, I spent those 3 days picking up my phone and putting it back down. Picking it up, putting it back down. Telling myself I didn't need whatever was on the other end of that number. Telling myself I was different, that I could see the game for what it was. I called on the 3rd day. He answered on the 2nd ring, like he was expecting it. Like the 3 days I spent convincing myself I was in control meant absolutely nothing to him. His voice was warm, familiar, the kind of voice that makes you feel like you've known someone longer than you have. He said he was glad I called. He said he had been thinking about me. He said he saw something in me that night at the restaurant that he didn't see very often, and that he wanted to talk about it properly. In person, at the studio, Tyler Perry Studios. I want you to understand what that invitation meant to a young man who came to Atlanta with nothing. That studio sits on 330 acres. It used to be a military base, Fort McPherson, the kind of ground that has history soaked into it, the kind of ground that has seen things. When you drive through those gates for the first time, the size of it hits you like a physical force. Sound stages as far as you can see. A back lot with entire city blocks built from scratch. A whole world constructed by one man's vision and one man's will, and one man's absolute refusal to let anyone else have a say in what got built. I felt small walking in. I think that was intentional. He met me personally. No assistant, no handler. Just Tyler Perry walking toward me across that lot like we were old friends, reconnecting. The smile was the same one from the restaurant. I noticed that, filed it away somewhere in the back of my mind, and kept walking. He took me to a private room, not a conference room, not an office, something more intimate than that, a working space. And that's when I saw the desk. I need you to understand what was on that desk. Scripts, stacked in neat, organized piles that covered every inch of the surface. Scripts for shows I recognized, shows that were currently on air, shows that hadn't been announced yet. All of it written in one hand, all of it controlled by one mind. He told me he wrote everything himself. No writer's room, nobody else's voice in the work, just him. He said it with a pride that was almost reverent, like he was describing something sacred. And the room got very quiet, not silent, quiet. The specific kind of quiet that has weight to it. The kind of quiet that makes you aware of how far you are from the door. I looked at those scripts and I looked at him, and something in the back of my mind that I had been ignoring since the restaurant got louder. Not loud enough, but louder. We ran lines together. And I want to be honest with you right now because you need to hear this part clearly. He was good. Genuinely good. Magnetic in a way that made you want to give him everything he asked for in a scene. Made you want to perform at a level you didn't know you had. That's the thing nobody tells you about dangerous people. They are not always ugly. They are not always obvious. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the room is the most talented thing in the room. We ran lines for 2 hours. And when it was over, he looked at me the same way he looked at me across that restaurant. Like something had been confirmed. Like I had passed a test I didn't know I was taking. He put his hand on my shoulder and told me I was exactly what he was looking for. Then he kept talking. That's the part I need you to pay attention to. He didn't stop. He didn't give me a moment to breathe or think or feel the weight of what was happening. He just kept talking. Warm, easy, natural. He said the studio was great, but it had limitations. Too many people moving around, too many distractions. He said the real work happened somewhere quieter, somewhere private. He said he had a home outside the city where he did his best creative sessions, where the real breakthroughs happen, where he took the people he truly believed in to see what they were actually made of. And then, almost as an afterthought, almost like it was the most casual thing in the world, he said, "You should come by this weekend." Not a question, not exactly an invitation. Something smoother than both of those things. The kind of sentence that assumes the answer before you give it. The kind of sentence that makes saying no feel like the strange option, like the thing that would require explanation. I said yes before I finished processing that he had asked. I didn't hesitate. I didn't pause. I didn't hear the voice in the back of my neck that had been trying to get my attention since the restaurant. I just said yes, the way you say yes when everything you have ever wanted is being handed to you by the person with the power to make it real. He smiled. Same smile. Always the same smile. And I walked out of Tyler Perry Studios that afternoon feeling like I had finally arrived. Like Atlanta had looked me in the eye and decided I was worth something. I didn't sleep well that night. I told myself it was excitement. I know better now. The drive out was longer than I expected. That's the first thing I remember. How far outside the city it was. How with every mile, the buildings thinned out and the trees got thicker and the road got quieter until it felt less like I was driving to someone's home and more like I was driving away from everything familiar, away from witnesses, away from anyone who knew my name or where I was going. I told myself I was being dramatic. I kept driving. The house was enormous. Not flashy the way you'd expect from a man with that kind of money. It wasn't trying to impress you. It was trying to contain something. High walls, heavy gates, the kind of architecture that isn't built for comfort, but for control, for keeping things in as much as keeping things out. When those gates closed behind my car, I heard it in my chest before I heard it with my ears. A low, clean sound. Final. He met me at the door himself. Same warmth, same smile. He was dressed casually like this was nothing. Like having me at his private home miles outside Atlanta was the most natural thing in the world. He walked me through the house, and I want to tell you it felt normal. I want to tell you it felt like two creative people about to do serious work together. But the truth is, the house felt wrong the way a held breath feels wrong. Everything was too still, too arranged, like a set dressed by someone who had studied what a home was supposed to look like but had never actually lived in one. We sat down. He poured drinks. And I want you to pay attention here because this is where the warmth became a weapon. He was at his best that night. Funny, generous. He talked about his come up, the years of nothing, sleeping in his car, the first play that changed everything. He made me feel like I was being trusted with something rare, like the walls were coming down and the real Tyler Perry was sitting across from me. And he had chosen me specifically to see that. I drank. We talked for hours. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, the edges of the room started to feel soft. Not wrong exactly, just soft. Like the air had changed consistency. Like the space between my thoughts had gotten wider than it should have been. I set my glass down and looked at it, and then looked at him. And he was watching me the same way. He watched me drink that champagne at the restaurant, patient, satisfied, like he was watching something he had already seen before arrive right on schedule. It got late. He said the drive back was too far. Said I'd been drinking and it wasn't safe. Said he had a guest room and it was no trouble at all. Every word reasonable. Every word the thing a thoughtful host would say. Every word delivered in that same warm, unhurried voice that had been slowly dismantling my instincts since the night he sent champagne across a restaurant. I said, okay. And then he said he wanted to show me something first. He stood up and started walking, and I followed him. That part I can explain. What I cannot explain is what happened in the space between standing up and following him. Because I want to tell you that I walked behind him of my own free will. I want to tell you that my legs moved because I decided they would. But that is not entirely what it felt like. What it felt like was a hand, not his hand. He never touched me. His hands were at his sides the whole time. But something had my hand. Something was leading me through that house the way you lead a child somewhere they have never been. Gentle, patient, certain of the destination in a way that I was not. I looked down at my hand twice while we walked. Nothing there, but I felt it. Warm, dry. Fingers laced through mine like we had walked this way 100 times before. Like whatever was holding my hand had been waiting a long time for me specifically to arrive at this house on this night so it could finally lead me where it needed me to go. I followed him down a hallway I hadn't seen before. Narrower than the rest of the house. Darker. The kind of hallway that feels longer than it looks. He stopped in front of a door and pushed it open without ceremony and stepped aside so I could see inside. A room, plain, quiet, a chair, a lamp casting just enough light to see by, and across from the door, a closet, slightly open, just enough to see darkness inside. And from somewhere inside, that darkness came something I cannot fully explain to you even now. Not a sound exactly, not a smell. Something older than both of those things. Something that recognized me before I recognized it. The invisible hand let go. I stood there in the doorway and felt the absence of it like a cold draft. Like something that had been holding me together had suddenly decided its job was done. I was alone in a way that had nothing to do with the number of people in the room. I should have turned around. I should have walked out of that house and driven back to the city and never looked back. But then his voice came from behind me, low, calm, like he was reading from a script he had written a long time ago. Go look in the closet. And God help me, I got up. I want to tell you I hesitated. I want to tell you that every instinct I had left fired at once, and I stood in that doorway and refused. That I turned around and looked Tyler Perry in his eyes and walked out of that house and drove back to the city and never looked back. I want to give you that version of this story because that version has a hero in it, but you already know that's not what happened. I walked to the closet, the door swung open slow, too slow. The kind of slow that doesn't belong to hinges and wood, but to something else entirely. Something that wanted me to see what was inside gradually. Wanted the reveal to land in my body before it landed in my mind. And when the darkness finally pulled back enough for my eyes to adjust, I saw it. A dress. Hanging alone in the center of the closet like it had been waiting there specifically for me. Not for the last few days, not for the last few weeks, for years. For longer than I had been alive. It was dark in color, simple in cut. The kind of garment that should have meant nothing, that should have looked like fabric on a hanger in a closet in a house outside Atlanta. It did not look like that. It looked alive, not moving, not breathing, but aware, the way a thing can be aware without having eyes, the way something ancient and patient and completely without mercy can sit perfectly still and radiate the specific knowledge that it has already won. That whatever is about to happen has already happened 1,000 times before and will happen 1,000 times again. And your presence here is not a tragedy to it. It is a routine. I felt my hand reach out. I want to be clear. I decided to reach out. Nobody forced me. The invisible hand was gone. Tyler Perry hadn't moved from the doorway behind me. There was no voice. No compulsion I can point to and name. Just my hand moving toward the fabric the way a moth moves toward light. Not because it doesn't know what fire is, but because knowing and stopping are two entirely different things. My fingers touched the dress, and the dress touched back, not with movement, with something that went through my hand and up my arm and into my chest and sat down there like it had found the room it had always been looking for. Cold at first, then warm, then something beyond both of those things that I do not have a word for. Something that felt like being emptied and filled at the same time. Like every version of myself that I had carried from childhood to that room was being quietly and methodically removed, filed away somewhere I would never be able to reach again. I stood there for a long time. When I turned around, Tyler Perry was still in the doorway, still smiling. And for the first time since the restaurant, that smile made complete sense to me. I understood it now from the inside. I understood what it was made of and what it was for and why it never changed. Because it was never his smile, it belonged to the dress. The career came after that, fast, faster than it should have. Doors that should have taken years opened overnight. My face on screens, my name in credits. Everything I drove to Atlanta for arrived like it had been sitting in a warehouse with my name on it, just waiting for the transaction to clear. But every morning I woke up and checked the mirror, and every morning there was a little less of me looking back. The memories went first, small ones. The smell of my grandmother's kitchen, the sound of my mother's laugh, the name of the street I grew up on. Gone. Not forgotten the way normal things are forgotten. Removed. Cleanly, deliberately, like pages torn from a book by hands that knew exactly which ones to take. Then the feelings went, then the dreams, and then the thing that used to wake me up at night and remind me that something was wrong stopped waking me up entirely. And I want to tell you that I fought it, that somewhere in the process I grabbed onto what was left of myself and refused to let go. But that would be a lie. And I am done lying to you. I made a promise at the beginning of this story to tell you the truth. And the truth is that losing yourself doesn't feel like losing. It feels like relief. It feels like finally putting down something unbearably heavy that you have been carrying so long you forgot it had a name. I still work at Tyler Perry Studios. I know those hallways, I know those sets. I know what lives inside those walls after dark, and I've been inside this machine long enough to know exactly how it stays running, exactly what it needs to keep going. New faces, new hunger, new young men arriving in Atlanta convinced they are different, convinced the city is going to see something in them worth choosing. Last week I was sitting in a restaurant, nice place, white tablecloths, low lighting. And across the room I saw him, young, hungry, laughing too loud with his friends the way you laugh when you're trying to feel like you belong somewhere. The way I laughed once in a room exactly like this one. I watched him for a long time. Then I signaled the waiter, leaned in close and told him to take 2 bottles of champagne to that table over there, the good ones, cold, perfect, the kind that cost more than a month's rent. And when the waiter pointed back at me and that young man looked up across the room, I smiled at him. Same smile. Always the same smile. Now let me ask you something before you go. You clicked on this story tonight for a reason. Maybe you told yourself it was curiosity. Maybe you told yourself you just wanted to be entertained. But something brought you here. Something made you press play and stay all the way until the end. I need you to think very carefully about what that something was, because I have been watching you this whole time. And I just signaled the waiter.